deciding match. And it's going to be an interesting one. We're going to have, some amount of sisters on both sides of the table. Marathis will be very much in evidence here. We've seen Ben Savva on screen quite a bit over the last couple of days because he's been able to string together some wins, just barely squeaking it through in a couple of matches. But you know what? It's not about winning by miles. It's about winning by inches. And for the final match of the tournament, we have probably the most complicated deployment of any of the different options available within AOS. This is Total Conquest. Now, Donal, how does Total Conquest work? How does someone win in this scenario?
Okay, so we have 4 objectives on 2 on each side. The players score 1 objective for each, for each objective that they score. They have they score 1 victory point. And if they take the objective from their opponent, they score an additional victory point. So the whole game is similar to everything that we've watched before. You score objectives with being within 6 inches, more models, and it's all about having control of more objectives than your opponent or taking them off your opponent.
Now, we've seen various different variations on objectives. Crucially, in AOS 2, you can cap objectives. You can stick someone on it, then kind of leave that objective behind and go and fight elsewhere. So what we're going to try and do is make sure that we have our objective markers clearly determining who's currently controlling them. In terms of the armies that we've got facing off here, on Ben Savva's side, we've seen that a fair amount. He is on Sisters. He's got Marathian friends working to do a lot of damage in combat. On the other side of things, what is it that we have Jack working with? Because I know that he has Marathi too, but I believe it's more of a mixed list. Is that correct?
Yeah, so Jack is running Hammerhall and a mixed order list. So it's one of the Firestorm formations, and he's running, let me try to find this. He's running Marathi.
Let's just see if we can find him.
So he's got Marathi, a Frost Lord, 2 Frost Heart Phoenixes. His general has the Inspiring trait, and the other Frost Heart has the Jade Diadem. Then his battle line is 3 units of 10 Arcanaut companies. Then he's got 2 units of 30 White Lions, and that takes him up to 2,000 points exactly.
So if he's starting at 2,000 points, that means he's not going to have any command points beyond the ones that he earns turn by turn. Command points, of course, something that was added with AOS 2. On the other side of things, in terms of Ben Savva's list, we've seen it on camera a fair amount. So he's got Marathi he's working with. He's got a Cauldron of Blood with a Slaughter Queen on it, Hag Queen, Bloodrack Medusa, and then, well, the Sisters of Slaughter that he's got going for him, they can do a lot of damage. He's the one that gets to buff them up and potentially attack for a lot as he gives things lower bravery and then potentially can go in. What's the bravery like on the other side of the table? Will he need to lower bravery too much?
So in terms of the White Lions, they have quite a few buffs. So they start off bravery 7, I believe, and with Hammerhall they get +1 bravery.
Okay, so this could be a tricky matchup for the Sisters.
Yeah, and with the banner they get another +1, so they're looking at about bravery 9 or 10. So I think battle shock wise it won't be that important.
But I mean, also, is it Mind Razor?
Mind Razor, I think Jack will have higher bravery for the Mind Razor unless there's Sinister on the board or Inspiring, so that could come into play.
It's something that we will be looking out for. These guys just figuring out their deployment at the moment. This is one of the most complicated bits of deployment. The easiest way to conceptualize it actually is if you imagine that the 2 objectives kind of out in the open are at the center of a rectangle, and then there's an additional rectangle of free space, and you think about the space that they can't deploy rather than the space they can. It gets a little bit easier to get your head around exactly what's going on with this this layout. But you can see that gradually these guys getting their forces on the board, and we will get a chance to see what they can do with it.
Yeah, I think it's going to be quite interesting. Ben has lower drops than Jack, I believe, so he might want to come in before Jack is able to put up any of his bravery buffs. Since Jack, as you said, doesn't have command points, he might try to alpha strike early game and score objectives. This scenario is quite interesting. So it's a question whether Ben will push to score 3 objectives turn 1, or if he'll try to hold off and not score and only score 2, so that he's not giving up the additional victory points if Jack takes the objective off him.
So that's you're talking about planning for a potential double turn there, maybe.
Yeah, potentially either the double turn, but even if he just puts a couple of models to score the objective, say on the bottom left or the top right, if Jack is able to steal it off him, then he will give up. He'll give up a victory point because his opponent is because Jack's taken off the objective.
Oh, I see. So you get them for holding objectives, but you also get them for taking objectives.
Exactly.
Bonus point. Okay, got it. Yeah, so this is very much a scenario that's designed around really creating as many choke points of big fights as possible. Now, one unit that we've not really seen on the board too much yet this weekend that I want you to just kind of talk through for me, because I know it's been popular for a while, but I've not seen it so much in AOS 2, are these Frostheart Phoenixes.
Yeah, so the Frostheart Phoenix, the main idea behind them usually is to cast a bunch of spells. Then they get +1 to their save for every spell cast within range, which means they end up becoming very tanky. So where you have 2 Marathis on the board, you can end up having quite a few spells go off, and it'll be interesting to see whether Ben is tempted to hold off on casting spells with Marathi to stop buffing up the Jack's Frostheart.
Now, for something like the Hag Queen that is using prayers rather than spells, do they trigger the Frostheart Phoenix?
No. The High Queen, the prayers don't trigger. It's only spells.
Okay, something to look out for as we get into the early stage of this game. These guys still just figuring out their deployment, and we get to see some very sort of neat lines on Ben Savva's side of things as he gets right to the very edges of his deployment zone. I mean, his army already very, very quick. He could potentially get all over this board on his very first turn.
Yeah, and it'd be interesting to see whether he swamps the board or holds off for a little bit. I think also another interesting point to talk about is the 2 Marathis on the board.
Okay.
Which will operate very differently. So Ben has access to all the Daughters of Khaine allegiance abilities, which means access to the spells, whereas Jack is running a mixed order list, so he doesn't have access to spells outside of Marathi's innate one.
Yeah, I guess that actually, as Jack came over and I kind of remarked on the fact that there's going to be Marathis on both sides, he did say, Ben's Marathi's better.
And that would be why. So it'll be interesting to see if that holds true as the game develops.
Now, this is going to be an unusual game, at least based on what we've seen on screen, in as much as we've seen a lot of death, we've seen a fair amount of Sylvaneth, and these 2 lists, as I understand it, pretty much, aside from if anything gets to drop in on the on Ben Savva's side of things with his some of his flying units, what's on the board at the beginning of the game, it's not going to get augmented too much. It's only going to be models getting taken off.
Yeah, there's no summoning in either list. So the only thing that will drop down are the 2 heart renders. So Jack will need to protect his objectives to make sure the heart renders don't score that during the game.
Yeah, and when they drop in, they have to be at least 9 inches away, or sorry, more than 9 inches away from every enemy unit. So he doesn't need to put too much back to tag things off there. But I guess that when they drop in, they actually got reasonable firepower, those.
So they have reasonable firepower, but also on a 4-up after they shoot, they can move.
Oh,
so
wow.
You can you start 9 away, but on a 4-up, especially with 2 units, one of those might get through. You can move, and then you can potentially charge and jump over. So they've got quite a bit of mobility even after they set up.
Yeah, typically speaking, when you drop in 9 inches away, 9 inches is a little bit tough on 2d6 to reliably do. Even if you're using command points to re-roll, it's by no means guaranteed.
Yeah, and there's no cogs in the in either list, so cogs would provide +2 if they were running it. But I think that will mean that he relies on the 4-up after shooting.
All right, looks like these guys getting fairly close to doing the big roll-off early doors. Now, explain to us exactly how it is that you determine first turn in Age of Sigmar, because I know it's not quite the same as in, for example, Warhammer 40,000.
Yeah, so whoever drops first and finish deploying their army means that they choose who goes first or second. So Ben has a battalion, the Slaughter Troop, which means he can drop quite a few units down at once. So he has less drops than Jack, and therefore should will have choice of whether he goes first or Jack goes first.
Now, his list, we've seen it be aggressive on some occasions, but he had a game against Ben last night where he was actually relatively defensive early doors. So it's not automatic within Age of Sigmar that you definitely want the first turn.
Not always. I think this is a scenario that does benefit from going first if he can secure the objectives. So we're starting to see him put some of his units on his left-hand side, so it looks top right on the screen. So it'll be interesting to see if he's going to take first turn and try to secure those to stop Jack from stealing them off him. So if he can get up in the first 2 turns to, or the first two battle rounds and score 3 objectives, that will put him on 6, and it will be very hard for Jack to recover from that.
So if you're Jack and you're going into this game, what are the kind of, you're assuming that you're going second, I presume, and then from there, what are the key things that you're hoping to achieve in order to get into it?
So I think when you're playing any Daughters of Khaine, you want to see if you can take off his supporting characters. So Ben's High Queens that provide battle shock immunity to the Witch Elves. So if Jack can try to snipe those characters out, then it puts Ben in a good place, or it puts Jack in a good place to then go into combat and try to battle shock off the Witch Elves. If Ben protects those characters, then it's comes down to blending combat. And although the White Lions can be quite tanky, they've got a 4-up save and a 4-up save. I think Ben will ultimately win that grind.
Now, for Jack, he does have access to a reasonable amount of shooting in his list. He has got the ability to do damage before we hit the combat phase. In terms of being able to snipe off those characters, hitting them with spells, that's something that makes total sense to me. Can you also aim at characters? Is there any kind of penalties for going for characters with your shooting?
Yeah, so there's a lookout sir, which means that any character within 3 inches of a unit of 5 or more models gets a -1 to hit in shooting. So the Arcanaut Company generally hits on 4-ups across the board, so they're going to be looking for 5s to be able to hit those characters.
So we're going to see the characters hiding away for Ben Savva wherever possible early doors, so he can continue to get the buffs off on his team, because, I mean, especially the unit of 30 that he's got going, we've seen Ben all weekend long just rolling a crazy amount of dice, and when he starts rolling that amount of dice, units go off the board fairly fast.
Yeah, and I think actually looking at what Ben's doing at the minute, he's decided not to set up any models on the top right, so he might be thinking of going second here, because he seems to be measuring out the ranges from the Arcanaut companies that Jack put on the board, so he might be wanting to ultimately go second and avoid the first turn of shooting.
Yeah, I guess that by going second, it means that those Arcanaut companies, they're not going to be able to do a whole lot in the first turn. They're very slow moving on their feet, and I guess that he does have an army that's well suited to be able to take objectives off opponents, given that he's got such an aggressive set of witches.
Yeah. So it looks like deployment has finished. We're taking a 5-minute break just so that they can vote
there's a coolest army vote, isn't there?
There's the coolest army vote.
Yeah, and the coolest army, how that works, we've got a formal painting competition that's already been judged. A few players that got voted as the sort of the key candidates for best painted, including a few that we've seen on stream. Jimbo's Sylvaneth was on there. Ben Savva's army is also one of the ones that was nominated. Adam Kunis's list was another one of the ones that was in the painting competition. So 3 of the ones that we've had on stream, good players that are also doing well in this tournament. Turns out they also know how to paint. Who knew? So they've been judged, but all of the players get to go around and look at each and every army and vote for the coolest army. And this is not necessarily quite as technical as the regular painting prize. It could simply be a matter of having a theme and executing it really well, having a sort of strong coherency. It doesn't necessarily require the same level of fine detail, though obviously the fine detail doesn't hurt.
Yeah, agreed. So Tim, what do you think is a cool army, or what would you look for in it?
I mean, for me, like, I kind of like it when people go a little bit off the beaten track with regards to model choices, poses, making something that I feel confident you wouldn't necessarily see someone else do, even if they were building the same army. So, like, I really like Andy's Death Army for that reason. That his army, he's got a lot of Spirit Host figures, so they, in other circumstances, you'd expect to see them in kind of pale blues, pale greens. He's got this sort of pale pink for all of his spirit colors. That means that you could take one of his figures off the table and put it somewhere else, and if someone found it, you would immediately know what army it's from. It's got a very strong kind of theme behind it, and to me, that's kind of cool.
Yeah, and actually, just looking at the table here, I think some of these terrain pieces come from that army.
They do, yes.
And you can see just how striking those pink trees are for any of the viewers at home. It's a fantastic looking army. Also, the display board that he set out, he tried to tell a story, which I think really helps.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, also, Ben Savva, it's sad to say that on stream you could almost believe that his army looks like unpainted plastic, because from this distance it's all kind of shades of grey, and when you get up closer it is still shades of black, white and grey, but you know what, there's an incredible amount of detail in there. And yeah, some of the work he's done on it, he will claim that his army is unfinished. I tell you what, I would love for my unfinished armies to look half as good as Ben Savva's list.
Agreed.
But yeah, there's a lot of cool armies here, and I think it's something that has really stood out for me about the Age of Sigmar community. There's clearly a lot of pride taken in making sure that you turn out a great-looking army. I mean, there's talk of 3-color minimums when it comes to painting for tournaments. I would be stunned if anyone could describe any of the armies in the room as being just the bare minimum, because there are some absolutely beautiful armies, and I would suggest to say that the worst painted army in this room looks a lot better than a whole ton of armies that I've seen at other events.
Yeah, I think the Age of Sigmar community really care about how their army looks and the gaming experience that gives to their opponents. And we've seen it across the board. And even though more recently there's a lot of new additions, a lot of people seem to care and really take pride and make efforts above and beyond.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, when it comes to modelling and painting, sort of, there would be some crowds where I would be worried that if I'd converted up my models, they might be like, "Oh, that's not a stock model. What's it meant to be? Don't like it. Can't use it." And I feel like it's almost the exact opposite when it comes to Age of Sigmar. That sort of, when I first got my Lord of Change and started putting it together and painting it, I was like, "Oh, do I want to give it the sword, or do I want to give it the wand? I'm not quite sure which is going to be best, and I don't want to end up giving it the wrong weapon, showing up to an event and being told, sorry, it's got the sword, you can't use it with the wand because you've not modelled it that way." And when I asked some Age of Sigmar players at another event about this, they kind of just looked at me as if I had two heads, because any amount of personalisation, choices to make your figures look cool, as long as it's not egregiously modelling for advantage, which I can't even imagine what that might be in Age of Sigmar, by and large, everyone just wants everyone's figures to look as cool as possible.
Yeah.
Which is ace. All right, so we've got our first little bits of the game kicking off here. I'm going to get rid of our deployment map, because we're pretty confident at this point that these guys have successfully managed to fit all of their pieces into the right stages on the map. So we'll just ditch that. We get to see in full Technicolor everything that's going on for these lists.
So it does look like Ben gave Jack turn one. It's probably not that much of a surprise given how how he ended up deploying, or as we saw his deployment.
So technically speaking, there should be an objective marker in the top left. Can't quite make it out right now. It might be that the Cauldron of Blood's essentially almost on top of it.
Potentially, although it looks a bit like it should actually be more left, looking at the objective just below on the bottom left.
Awesome. So we got a few tokens just representing pluses to armor save that are being put down by Jack now.
It's nice of him to make it so easy for us to tell, and probably similar for Ben. So looks like they're +3 to armor save Frost Art, so he's got 3 spells off so far.
Yeah, the Frost Art Phoenix is the model. The bases are on the board. The models are kind of just off to one side now, so that we can keep track of the counters more easily. Yep. Massive movement, as one might expect from these flyers.
And also Jack was probably being a bit cheeky of casting some spells that don't have any effect. So Arcane Bolt, for instance, is a damage dealing spell with an 18-inch range, but even if Jack casts that, then and doesn't have an eligible target, it will still help on the Frost Heart save. So I think that's how he probably got up to the...
So you fire the Arcane Bolt just off into the sky, as if just loose... Okay, so it sounds like Marathi's getting extra range on casts as well.
Yeah, so she doubles her range. Jack just confirmed nicely for us.
At various points, if we need to, we can go down to the table to get audio from the guys as they're playing. Let's see how many objectives Jack's want to go for here on his battle round 1.
So he's putting his White Lions on the top right. Looks like he's probably going to get almost 2/3 of that unit in there. So you're probably talking about 15 to 20 models.
And when it comes to contesting objectives, it's about the number of models that you have nearby, right? Not number of wounds or anything else, or who's closest, maybe.
Yeah, it's the number of models within 6 inches, and if your unit stretches across 2 different objectives, which will be probably quite tough in this game, the one unit can contest 2 different objectives.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So that changed in AOS 2.
So stringing out gigantic lines of grots or whatever is suddenly looking even better.
Yeah, not that I'd suggest anyone does that.
Nah.
We're just going to...
All right, so initial movement. We're actually going to see a shooting round going on relatively soon. We don't get tons of shooting here on our top table, but when you've got all these dwarves, suddenly that changes around just a little bit.
Yeah, we've definitely seen shooting drop away in this in the recent edition of AOS 2, and it's very much a combat meta, which makes it quite interesting. So now we can see Jack dropping back, so he looks like he's going to concentrate on the 2 objectives on his right, and potentially not try to score the objective on the bottom left, which is an interesting choice, and I assume Jack has a good reason why.
I mean, I guess that the thing is his army doesn't initially appear to be super fast, that in later turns he would easily be able to pull a fake and come back and try and take that, because it's a long old way between these objectives.
It is a long old way. I guess he's definitely thinking about turn 3, turn 4. The Frost Hearts are very fast, so no matter what Ben does, he has to be careful that he's not giving up too much on those objectives. But if Ben takes the double turn here, he might be able to move along and score that objective on the top right from Jack. So that's definitely an interesting choice.
And this is the one scenario that we've had over the course of the weekend where capping objectives is not a thing. It's about taking and holding. Is that correct? Can you just can you take an objective and then walk away from it in this one?
Yes. So
you still can.
So most objectives you can do that. The only ones that you can't are the ones which rely on characters controlling the objectives.
I see. Okay. So these guys just carefully measuring things out. In Age of Sigmar, no penalty for doing lots of measuring all the time, and indeed it's probably most of the time quite a good idea.
Yeah, it takes out a lot of the indecision of the game. If you agree just with your opponent, okay, this is 24 inches away, this is 9 inches away, it stopped. Especially if you declare it before rolling a charge, then you don't have any accidental nudges or you don't overmove something. I think that's super important, and it keeps good etiquette for the game.
Yeah, it turns out that clear communication, it just means that you get to have good games each and every game.
Agreed.
Okay.
So it looks like Jack has finished his turn 1 by the looks of it.
I mean, I guess he was out of range for a lot of things, which is the reason he got put in for round 1, right?
Yeah, I think Ben deployed so that Jack could not try to score too soon. So
he'll have scored 2 there? Is that right?
Yeah.
All right, let's just get that updated. There we go.
So it looks like I think the top right is going to be the most interesting objective, and that's probably where most of the battle is going to take place in. Jack does not have a super fast moving army, so I don't see how he can easily get across to the bottom left objective, unless he's planning on feinting with the Frostheart Phoenixes and moving over in his turn battle round 2 and battle round 3.
So we've got one of the Frost Phoenixes is just to the south of that top right wood. The other one is about a foot or so to its right.
Yeah.
That objective on the right, pretty heavily defended. And it's going to be a combination of, if Ben wants to take it, not only does he need to put in a lot of models, so he literally has more models close to the objective marker, he's going to have to do a fair amount of killing here.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see how the 4-up sleeve of the White Lions hold up against the many attacks of the Witch Elves.
Yeah, Ben has brought along a colossal bag of dice because, especially once buffed, these Daughters of Khaine can really just roll a crazy amount of dice.
Yeah. Have you played against it, Tim?
I've not played against it yet, but it's one of the ones that's pretty concerning, because one of the things when you're rolling a lot of dice is that some of the randomness of the game can kind of balance itself out a little bit more quickly, which means that rather than, maybe some of your Treefolk Ancients that roll 1 dice and then do a lot of damage, Ben can pretty consistently expect to be doing however much damage is his average.
Yeah.
Lots of buffs going on over there for this group, so they're shaping up for some action.
Yeah, and you can see that Jack is writing down the spells or prayers that are being cast. So I think that's, again, very good etiquette. It stops any confusion in later rounds over which units have what effects on. So that's incredibly useful from him as well. And just an example of top table behavior.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen some really sort of heads-up play when it comes to just making life clear and easy for yourself and your opponent. Means that you don't have to waste mental energy on remembering those sorts of things. I know that Jimbo, who we've seen on the top tables a couple of times, he has what he refers to as his little cheat sheet, which is literally a list of things to keep in mind on each and every turn. And it means that he can be that much more confident that he gets all the basics right and he can focus on his strategy.
Yeah. Especially in the hero phase, I think that's where there's so many special rules, and I always take, when I go to a tournament, take a list with, this is the order that I want to do things in, and these are the things, so I can tick off in every game.
And I know a lot of players, they keep kind of a log of all of their tournament games so they can reflect back on which bits and pieces they've had to remember, maybe struggle with how particular scenarios play, so they can make sure they get the most out of every game.
Yeah. Okay, so this is interesting from Ben. He's starting to move his units across. Are they Witch Elves that are stringed out, or are they the Sisters of Slaughter?
I think that those ones are the Witch Elves. We can always just wander across and have a look. We're not perilously far away from the table itself.
I'm going to go and pop over.
Alrighty. Yeah. One of the things when you've got an army with this many pieces is that sometimes the movement can take a little bit of time. Movement trays, as you can see here, do get used to some extent, but occasionally those figures, they'll want to come out of the trays just so that they're going to be able to get in the exact position that they need to. And one of the things that we may well see Ben doing here in terms of the way that he moves across his big units is there'll be a little snaking line leading away from the main body of the unit, and that's to make sure that he stays in range to be able to get all of the kind of buffs that he really wants, so that his unit, they only need to be within a particular range of the character that's giving them a bonus, and they don't need to be wholly within. So these long snaking lines mean that he gets to tick off this objective and stay in range for buffs, and this is a pretty nice position to leave yourself in. We have a lesser spotted Donal back at the commentary desk. Which units have we got moving around here? Because from the top, they certainly do look a little bit similar.
Yeah, so it is the Slaughter, or the Sisters of Slaughter, or the unit that's lined up in the very long conga line. And he's probably done that because they have a 6-inch pylon. So that means if they do get into combat, or they can move much faster than Witch Elves, who only have a 3-inch pylon.
3 inches is the standard on the pylons. You get to, at the start of combat, just move in units that are already within combat so that more of them can actually get involved in the fighting. But yeah, a 6-inch pylon, that long line could very quickly turn into a scary sort of a blob if needed.
Yep, indeed. And guys, get involved in the chat if you have any questions. We have a few regulars online, so hello Darren and Scotty Jock.
Welcome, of course. And for those of you that are just tuning in now, if you did want to catch any of the other games that we've got going on, we're gradually, slowly but surely getting them all uploaded to YouTube, as well as, of course, them currently sitting in the Twitch archives. The goal is to make sure that we've got one nice, neat little playlist for you of the whole of AngelCore 2018. And then going forward, I think the plan is to try and stream a few more games here from Magic Madhouse of Age of Sigmar, because, you know what, it's quite good fun.
How's the sound quality, guys? Apparently I've been quiet.
Yeah, I've been adjusting your levels a little bit. I forget sometimes that I'm a loud talker when it comes to these sorts of things.
That's okay, I can speak up. I just the tables aren't that far away, so if we're talking about anything that they're doing, I don't want to give things away.
Yeah, it's the sort of thing that while we're simply describing literally what's on the table, it's not too big a worry. But what we can do is we can turn up the volume but down our own voices, so that these guys can't hear, but we get to say all the good juicy details.
Yeah, let me know if this is sounding any better. Am I okay?
Yeah, I think that we're doing all right, but I'm sure that our chat will help out on that. They seem like good people in that regard. Yeah, so that's us just making sure that the objective marker, now that it's no longer hidden by a cordon of blood, is in absolutely the perfect spot. And you can see that 3 of those tokens are on Ben Savva's side of things. He's going to be potentially scoring quite a few points this turn, depending on whether or not he can get in a useful fight in this top right-hand corner here.
Yeah, I think he's going to be quite far away to charge. The only thing I can see him charging is the Frostart Phoenix. So I think the roll for priority is going to be quite important, because he could potentially...
Oof, a 1 there from Ben Savva on the roll for priority.
So I'm assuming Jack's going to probably want to take this. I'd be surprised if he decides against it.
So I believe that Ben there scored at the end of turn 2 points. I think that he had the bottom objective as well as the one on the left. The 2 on the right-hand side currently in Jack Armstrong's possession. So 2 apiece as we get into battle round 2 here.
Yep. So Positive Victim just asked, is Ben the only one on 4 majors? So at the minute, he is the only one on 4 majors, but secondaries have a lot of points available here. So it is still up in the air, and if Jack wins this and scores secondaries, then I think he could be in with a very good shot of taking it away.
Yeah, I mean, the way that secondaries work here, you get 30 points for your major win, but there's another 20 points potentially available for each player when it comes to secondaries. So you can get up to 3 points for having each of your battle line units alive, up to 2 points for keeping wizards or heroes with artifacts alive. There's a point for each 2x2 square on the table, up to a max of 6. For every 450 points killed, that's a secondary point. For non-general heroes killed, you can score up to 2 points. killing a general, that's a point, and then if you've got some spare command points at the end of the game, that's a point. Now, the glimmer of hope for various people in the room is that while Ben Savva is the only one with 4 majors right now, he had a couple of games that were relatively light on minors, so it does mean that, for example, Jack here that he finds himself against, if Jack wins this game, he'll be in very good shape to take the title here.
Yeah, and I think there's also some points available for sporting in the pack as well. So that always can change things at the last minute. So it's quite something that we will we'll see when results are submitted. But at the minute, it's definitely all up in the air, and this is certainly the favorite, or the 2 favorites for coming time. Oh wow! So Jack, although he won the priority roll, he's decided to give Ben the turn, which I don't think either of us saw coming. So Jack is a great player. He's won several big events. AngelCore eluded him last year, though. I think he lost 2 last year. So potentially this is what he thinks he needs to do, and he's looking for the double turn later on in the game.
Now, this is exactly the kind of thing that, for myself, as a comparatively new player to at least this edition of Age of Sigmar, the temptation to take the double turn is frequently too much for me. If I know I've got the option of it on any given turn, it's very, very easy for me to succumb to that. But you were saying that, by and large, you prefer to try and avoid it in the early turns of the game.
Yeah, I think if you take the double turn, if Jack had taken this, then Ben runs the risk of Ben double turning him in turn 3 or 4, and that's when Ben's allegiance abilities start to really ramp up. So I can understand why Jack says, actually, you know what, now I'm happy to sit where I am. I'd prefer the double turn, because that might allow my Frost Heart to jump over your lines if it survives the Sisters of Slaughter, or my White Lines to get into your unit. So I can understand why he wants to hold off. It will be an interesting one to see whether that was a mistake or not.
Yeah, so many decision points in these games. It's easy to look at any of these sorts of games where there's a lot of dice rolling and think, well, this feels pretty random. It could just come down to who rolls better. And obviously, at some point, if you're rolling 6s and your opponent's rolling 1s, it will gradually add up. But there's a lot of decision points as well there that can just make life very, very difficult for opponents. And it means that the more skilled player, even if they're rolling maybe a little bit worse, still has every reason to think they could win the game.
Yeah, agreed. So it looks like Ben, I missed this earlier, but Ben has made Morathi the big version of Morathi.
She's big giant Morathi snake lady.
And Jack has held off making that decision. That could be because Jack has a bit of shooting in the list. So Ben was probably was a bit more conservative with the position of Morathi, so I can understand why he did it. Jack can afford to be a bit more aggressive, putting his Morathi forward, which means he can probably wait until later turns before he transforms her. I imagine Jack will look to transform her next turn.
Now, presumably, now that Morathi's large and in charge, the Lookout Sir rule doesn't apply in quite the same way?
Yep, so only non-monsters get the Lookout Sir.
Yeah, it would seem crazy that you might have some gigantic monster getting blocked by a single small figure.
Yeah, now Morathi does have a rule called the Iron Amulet, which means she can only suffer a maximum of 3 wounds per turn.
Yeah, and that's something that with her 12 wounds, it means that you can afford to be a little bit cavalier about throwing her out front and centre. In the position that she's at the centre of the board, she'll be in range for a lot of her magics. She's also going to potentially be able to pull off some pretty nifty charges in future turns.
Yep, agreed. And with 12 wounds in her giant form, she's quite difficult to take off. So
yeah, it's 4 consistent turns of successfully dealing the 3 damage. And if you have even one turn where you only deal 1 or 2, that's like a whole extra battle round that she gets to wreak havoc.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay, so here we see Ben Savva attempting to go ahead on objectives by moving into a position where he should be able to get a good charge off.
Did he just run with those? Or did he... It looks like he ran, given how far he's moving them.
But is that not part of what the sisters get to do, that they get a run and charge? I believe that's part of what makes the sisters so fast is that they do get to have their cake and eat it when it comes to the movement phase and then following up with charges.
Yeah, that's the horn blower that allows him to do it. So be interesting whether he decides to actually. I assume he will want to charge the white lions because it's better to hit. It's better to hit in AOS than be hidden.
Yeah, and something that I'm gradually learning over the course of this weekend, because again, my impulsiveness gets the better of me. Getting involved in just one fight that you think you're decisively going to win, better off than trying to split things up and go on multiple fronts.
Yep, so the way AOS works, whoever's turn it is, they generally get to choose the first unit to attack. Then your opponent goes next, and then it alternates between the two. So if it's your turn and you've charged in, say, 2 units into 2 very combat units, it means that yes, you'll get to choose who goes first, but your opponent might be able to attack back. And that's usually quite a big issue for when you're playing. So with the Witch Elves, Ben's probably looking to do as much damage as possible to the White Lions and ideally, I imagine he wants to delete them. So it'll be interesting. He has just been careful to make sure that he keeps his Witch Elves in range, so they don't get battle shocked off.
Now, because we're already in Ben's round 2, he's been accumulating command points, and it seems likely to me that we're going to see, because Ben's quite a combat-oriented army, he'll save those command points for these later stages in the game to either deal with battle shock or deal with his ability to make successful charges.
Yeah, so one of the abilities that the High Queens give means that if you're within range, you are immune to battle shock. So he can actually hold his command points until the High Queens are shot off. So he can probably it means he can probably be a bit more loose up with the command points and only use it for the reroll charging. So the White Lions look pretty close. He might not need it this turn, but he might want to use it in the next couple of phases.
And we have seen on camera double ones on charges, and those are the sorts of rolls that can swing a game.
Yeah, and if he doesn't get the charge in here, I think that's going to be quite a big issue for him.
So we see here that Ben carefully generates a nice little sort of shield for that Cauldron of Blood. He doesn't want to have a position where there's going to be able to be a Frostheart Phoenix that can make its way in, and I think he's done a good job of creating a nice little screen here that will mean that if a Frostheart Phoenix wants to get into that Cauldron of Blood, it's going to have to really move very, very well.
Yeah, agreed. I don't see where he's going to be able to do that. So I think Marathi looks like it's going to be quite a long charge for her to get into the Frost Art. The Witch Elves probably can, but Ben might want to avoid drawing the Frost Art into combat because the Witch Elves generally don't survive a lot of attacks.
Yeah, they hit very, very hard, but if you hit them back, they fall over comparatively easily.
Except I think with the Hagnar, he gets a 5-up save as well. So
all right.
So it can make them a bit more resilient. So it's definitely a game of dice.
All right, we shall see. Looks like Ben is going to be able to get in here.
I think he rolled a 9 on the charge, and you can see he's wanting to avoid drawing in the Frost Heart into combat, which means the Frost Heart's going to be free to potentially charge Marathi or get into the Witch Elves later.
Yeah, for as long as possible, if you can hold off the any of the combat units. If they can't get into combat, they're literally not doing anything. So for now, at least, he's trying to make sure that he's going to be able to just deal with one unit at a time. Yep.
So Jack obviously won the priority, so I think this is the combat that's going to decide whether or not that was a mistake to him.
Yeah, and it's going to be with Ben acting first. Firstly, he's going to get to delete some of at least the White Lions on the other side of things. The other thing is, you can see here, as he's charging in, he gets to put more and more models right on top of that objective. So he gradually takes off units. It seems likely to me that he's at least going to get this objective. It's just going to be a matter of whether or not he gets it decisively enough that he can then defend it as well.
Yeah, which I think will be interesting. So we're going to have the Witch Elves obviously attacking the White Lions. They're probably the most competitive, or the most combat-y unit in the game. And equally, the White Lions are surprisingly tanky, so they still have the 4-up save. There's a Frost Heart right behind, so yes, we might see some White Lions die, but it potentially will put the Witch Elves in a position where they die in the next turn or two.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily the end of the world for Jack if he loses the objective this turn, but then immediately takes it right back, right?
Yep. So obviously they're both on 2 points each. If Ben scores this, he'll be on. He'll score his 2 on the left, and he would get an additional 2 for taking it off Jack. So that put him on 4. So he'll be on 6 total. But Jack has one turn, or has a turn remaining. So if he scores, if he takes it back, then he's going to be looking at scoring 3. So it will only be 6-5, with Jack potentially getting the double turn.
Here comes Morathi into the Frostheart Phoenix. So this is what we talked about having multiple combats going on. I guess that the fact that Ben doesn't really mind, I would guess that he's conceded the notion that Morathi will take 3 wounds here. She can't take any more per turn. So being involved in the second combat may be not quite as concerning for him as it would be for a lot of units. He's still going to get the first action in the big scary White Lions combat, and then after that he doesn't really care. I guess that Morathi's stat line could go down 1 by taking 3, so that might impact her ability in combat a little. But
yeah, but I think what we'll probably likely see is Ben. I think you're right. So I think we'll see Ben attack with the Witch Elves, probably take 3 wounds from the Frost Heart into Morathi, and then attack back into the Frost Heart and potentially do some. 72 attacks from the Witch Elves into the White Lions. That is going to be interesting for Jack, and I think he was probably expecting this, but we'll see how it goes.
72 is a lot of rolls, and it's with all of the buffs, you see all those little tokens above this. This is a little bit bonkers, because it's not just. I think that there might be some exploding attacks in there as well. It gets pretty out of hand. Let's turn this one up so we can hear what's going on from the table a little bit. So exploding 6s, meaning those 6s turn into additional hits.
4s, so 5s, but you re-roll 1 to 3s.
Yeah. 5s then?
So we'll take out 5s. Yeah. We'll take out, put 4s somewhere different, because you won't re-roll them. That's a lot of 5s and 6s though, mate. Yeah, 2 there. So these are my armor saves.
Yep.
4s. 4. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14 from the first lot.
It was -1 surrender. It was a mind razor.
Oh, so I only saved about 4 anyway. Should I save 3? Yeah. So sorry about that.
That's all right.
Sorry, mate. So I've got 13.
Okay, so then that's 36. I'll take out 4. Oh no, because the champion's at the back anyway.
Oh, okay.
So that was only the first wave of attacks here.
Yep, it's same again. Looks like loads more misses this time.
That's not what I want to see. I think that was a bit above average on the first one.
Yeah, it was a little, wasn't it?
Whereas the buff you wouldn't do that much because you've got all your buffs back on, but it would have given me a slight chance.
Yeah, it's just that way.
Yeah.
Am I on again?
You are.
Okay, cool. So
Yeah, that's really nice.
I believe this is only the second third of the attacks.
wow. So how many was done in the first set of attacks?
I think it was 9 on the first set.
Okay.
So 1s and 2s, so
5, 4's there. 5 and 6's not bad. 4. So now save your price. Yeah. Well, not good for me. No. 2. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11, plus 13, so 24? 24.
So Jack has lost 24.
Out of 30.
Yeah, that is a lot. So he might lose.
3, so that's 25, so I've got 5 left.
So he only has 5 white lands left, so he may or may not use a command point. Command point there.
Is that a command point for the battle shock on this?
Yeah.
Yeah, because even with a high bravery, when you lose that many figures in one fell swoop, battle shock becomes a very real problem. Does he just concede that unit is done for anyway? Holding a unit up in combat is a pretty big deal, right?
It is a pretty big deal, and he probably wants to make sure the Witch Elves aren't in combat to pile in next turn into the Frost Heart, so he's probably concerned about that. On the other hand, if he can always run the white lands away, and it means that you've still got some models that can contest the objective later, and it's something that Ben has to deal with, and the only way Ben can deal with it is in combat. So
yeah, a little bit to consider here. So now the Frostheart Phoenix, we're going to see it attacking back.
Yep, so what we've just seen Jack do is piling in away from the Witch Elves with the Frost Heart, which completely makes sense. So he's probably looking to do some damage on Marathi in this turn. It'll be interesting to see how he moves in the later phases, but he's definitely thinking about battle round 3 and 4 by moving that Frost Heart like that.
All right.
Frost Heart is, I think, still on +3 to the saves, so that would be quite interesting to see how that goes.
Only takes 2 wounds though. Now we spoke earlier on about Marathi has a limit that she can only take a maximum of 3 wounds per turn. If you don't deal the full 3 each turn, this gets a little messy because essentially it means that her 12 wounds are now going to last 5 turns rather than 4 turns of consistent damage going through.
Yeah.
Pretty good rolling here from Ben Savva on his turn 2. All right, the White Lions valiantly attacking back. They are one of the better attacking units around. However, when there's only 5 of them left, yeah, that's just the one Witch Elf getting taken down here. Oh, one more save. He gets the 6. All right, fine. You know what? Those White Lions, not a scratch.
And that's where the Hagnar save becomes really important for Ben. So it'll be interesting what Jack's plan is. Marathi is quite close to... Ben will be on 6, actually.
Oh, sorry, my bad.
Because he scores an additional 1 for stealing it off Jack. So I think Jack has just explained his plan to Ben, which is to transfer Marathi into the big snake, move the 14-inch, move up, and use the gears to pick out a model from the sisters.
To break unit coherency?
Break unit coherency.
See, this is a play that we've seen Ben Savva playing about with all weekend long, so he's certainly familiar with it. But yeah, if you break unit coherency, explain to us exactly how that ends up working out for...
So if you break unit coherency at the end of the battle round, after battle shock, you have to remove all... you have to choose which side you want to keep and remove all the rest of the models in that unit that are outside of coherency.
Now, presumably, if he's going to do this, he also wants to make sure he retreats those white lines out of combat, because otherwise, just in the consolidation during combat, they could fix their coherency, right?
Well, actually, I think he's planning on doing this with the with Marathi onto the Sisters of Slaughter.
Oh, I see. Sorry.
Now, interestingly, he only has a 6-inch range, so he's probably then going to need to charge Marathi away. when he does this. So
Now, the reason this works is because Marathi picks particular models, right?
Yeah,
As opposed to just killing models of your opponent's choice.
yeah, so it's a 6-inch range spell, and it hits on a 2-up, and you pick a model and then remove, and it's -1 round. So
Hang on, if it's 6-inch range, how's this even working?
I think when he transforms, he can set up within 14 inches. So I don't know why he hasn't moved quite so.
I thought that you could end up being, you have to set up as close as you could when you transform, but if that's more than 14
yes,
inches,
yeah,
then
yeah.
you're not able to move.
Yes, yeah, agreed. So he'll be able to move 14 inches. So he'll be doing this. So he's currently in his hero phase at the minute, and he'll be doing this in the next.
Oh, is this a shooting attack as opposed to
Yeah,
a...
sorry, it's a
okay,
shooting
sorry,
attack,
my
yes.
bad. That was the missing piece of this puzzle I was getting mixed up over.
Yeah, so he'll be doing this next. Now the interesting point. So the Sisters of Slaughter have a 6-inch pylon. So he needs to be within 6 inches to be able to do this. And if he doesn't move her away, and remember to charge Marathi into the other Marathi, the Sisters of Slaughter are going to be able to pile in and regain coherency.
This is interesting. A lot to keep in mind here.
I'm assuming Jack has thought this out.
In the heat of the moment, though, there's a lot of things to consider in these games.
Yeah.
I mean, this is exactly one of those areas where being really familiar with both the details of the rules and exactly what yours and your opponent's models can do sets apart the real tournament player. I've seen Marathi breaking up coherency a couple of times over the course of this tournament, and it's something that it can definitely catch some people unawares.
Yeah, but with both players using Marathi, there's probably no excuse. So
there was actually an interesting case in round 3. Ben Savva that was looking to do this against Nagash, break in half of a unit of a big old unit from the Spirit Host. I think it was some Reapers, and as it turns out, talking to the other Ben afterwards, he was like, I kind of hoped that he succeeded, because then I would have got to I'd have all of these figures that I could have re-summoned onto the end and effectively got some free movement. So it's not even always obvious that in some matchups that you want to do this cool trick.
yeah, and sometimes you definitely want to be holding off to. You definitely want to be holding off and not killing units, especially against death.
Yeah, it seems counterintuitive. You know, what is this, war or just, having a nice cup of tea? But sometimes a nice cup of tea is exactly what you need.
Exactly. So we can see Jack wanting to move the Frostheart Phoenix so that when he charges into the Witch Elves, he reduces how many can pile in and attack him.
Interesting. And discretion, the better part of valor for these White Lions. They are going to go and just hang out somewhere in the corner, at least for now. Potentially in the future they can threaten to take away that objective, but for now they're just going to watch on as the pair of Phoenixes try and get something going.
Yeah, well, I think Ben lacks much shooting in his list, so there's the Heartrenders who can pop down, but ultimately if Ben needs to keep something on that objective to be able to continue to score it. So I'm thinking that we'll probably see Jack not score this objective on the top right this turn, but definitely he's playing a game looking at turn 2 to turn 3.
Now we see a lot of these combat gauges out. Combat gauges, the tournament player's best friend in terms of making sure that they get all of their ranges measured out very, very carefully. And he's trying to use this to figure out exactly the perfect spot to put his Marathi figure in before finalizing his movement.
Yeah, so what he wants to be able to do is just knock a couple of those sisters out of coherency. But as I said, he needs to be careful that he doesn't just leave them within 6 inches, because then the Sisters of Slaughter can easily just pile in.
And that's more of a memory game than anything else, because it's not as if there's definitely distance available to him to get everything that he needs here. It's just a matter of keeping each of these facets in mind.
Yeah. and he might not necessarily see it because the Frost Heart's already in combat with Marathi, so it might feel like a less useful move on his part.
And this is one of those areas, and it's something that we've seen come a lot because we've had a lot of combat armies that have been around for this particular tournament. That if you're an army that can make use of charges as a movement action, then essentially you're getting kind of a double move, really. And then, especially when you then have death as well, that you're using summoning as moves, you can have armies that, on paper, when you look at the stat sheet, look like they should be quite slow, that can kind of just charge across the board, no pun intended.
So we're seeing Jack starting to plan for shooting, and I'm assuming he's going to want to shoot some of these Witch Elves with the Arcanaut Company. So that's the main, or one of the big differences between these two lists is Jack has 3 units of the Arcanaut Companies, all of which can do some decent damage to
they're low armored figures, aren't they? So you shouldn't need a crazy amount of power in those shots. It's just getting weighted numbers, and with these battle line units, he has weighted numbers. Okay. Now, I guess that my one concern with a lot of what Jack's got planned here, he's doing lots of things that are, in abstract, good things to do. He's gradually whittling down what's on the board, and we've already established this is not a matchup where you need to worry about anything getting summoned or brought back. But purely by the numbers here, he's having a turn which, on the face of things, to me, looks like one where he's not going to be scoring very many points.
Yeah.
He kind of it looks to me like this is the kind of turn where he's doing a lot of good value play, hoping to get a double turn. But if he doesn't get there, it could be a big risk.
Well, I think actually, yes, the double turn will be really interesting for him because Marathi can run to the bottom left, potentially well, actually, Marathi should be in combat by the end of this, so she can't actually retreat. But I think the double turn will be useful for him, but he's definitely trying to whittle down these units, because once Ben loses the large unit of Sisters and the large unit of Witch Elves, then Jack should dominate the board and should be able to score more objectives. So Jack's probably comfortable with potentially losing the first. The double here. He's probably wanting to win a double at the end of turn 3.
Interesting. This is all preparation for a really big end game, essentially.
I think so.
Okay.
So Jack has just removed to break coherency. So I think that's the end. So then Jack has the shooting of the Witch Elves and the Arcanaut Company into the Witch Elves. So it'll be interesting to see what he does next. And actually, just to confirm, he did run the Frost Heart away from Marathi. So maybe he has remembered that of the 6 he has remembered about the 6-inch piling.
So he's going to get into combat, and that combat is going to be useful to him for a whole variety of reasons.
Yeah.
These guys all just double checking their ranges all over the place.
Yeah, so it looks like the Arcanaut Company are potentially just out.
Now, different games have slightly different sets of rules with regards to cover when it comes to shooting. In terms of the shooting that Jack has going on here, he needs line of sight for his models.
Yeah.
But then, does cover do anything else other than blocking line of sight? Does it impact on saves or to hits?
So if you're entirely in cover, then you get +1 to save.
Okay.
Which I think is similar to 40k.
It is, yes.
Is that correct?
It's something that has varied a little bit over the years between the various games. It's just useful to check so that everyone that's watching at home is operating on the same set of information, I suppose.
And it doesn't look like anyone's actually in cover, so that might not come into play.
Jack, he's definitely thinking it all through pretty carefully. Counting up all of those potentially dead models. A glittering prize.
Provided he remembers to move Marathi. So, welcome everyone. For anyone else who's just joined, I think we're up to 18 viewers at the minute.
Lovely stuff. You know, these numbers, we've got the people that are watching now, but I already know that there's a whole bunch of players in the room now that are just juicily waiting for the opportunity to be able to watch some of the matches that we got on this weekend. When they get home, they will all be up on YouTube. So it's one of those things where sort of whenever or wherever you're watching us from, welcome. Even if we happen to be, you know, living in the past and you're living in the future, that's cool too. In fact, in some respects, that's far cooler.
Yeah. So hello to everyone in the future. We hope the world is better.
Yeah.
But we have Jack running a Hammerhall and Ben running Daughters of Khaine. So quite excited to see how this works. I think this is the first time Jack has taken this out.
It's one of those lists that I don't think, like, this feels to me like the kind of list that comes from recognizing that you have an opportunity and experimenting a little bit. It's not an obvious one on paper.
Yeah. So what we've just seen Jack do now is charge into the Sisters of Slaughter, which kind of nulls out part of the rationale of trying to break coherency, I think.
It feels that way to me. It might be that I'm missing something here, though.
I don't know if he's measured. Maybe he thinks that the breaking coherency between the Frost Heart on the he might be trying to move the Frost Heart to stop the units being able to pile in and rejoin coherency. So that might be part of Jack's plan.
Because when you pile in, you have to move to the nearest enemy.
Yes, the nearest enemy. So by moving the Frost Heart into that position, I think Jack might be planning on Ben not being able to move because you can't move out of coherency, or you can't move if you're still outside of coherency, unless you can rejoin coherency. So potentially that's what Jack's plan is here.
So what happens at the start of combat if we assume that coherency is currently broken?
Yeah.
Are we saying that he wouldn't be able to pile in with either end because either end doing so would be breaking coherency?
Yeah, although
further
looking at this, it definitely looks like so the models at the bottom left here that are closer to Marathi can move towards Marathi. So the question is, can they move in such a way to rejoin coherency? And because they're 1 inch apart, they may not be able to.
Yeah, it's going to be very close. There's going to be some very careful measuring, I'm sure.
Yeah, and probably just some discussion between the two players to see what's going on.
It's a very smart plan from Jack Armstrong here. This is some high-level play that really requires understanding of a lot of the rules in some depth.
Yeah, a lot of rules, but also he needed that good charge with the Frost Heart at the top right to be able to get across to the Sisters of Slaughter and make this possible. So well done to Jack. I think we'll be interested to see how much damage this Marathi does to the Sisters of Slaughter.
And I guess that the one kind of funny thing is, if he ends up killing lots of Sisters of Slaughter just in combat, how much value did his initial Stone Gaze do?
Well, what if it potentially just means that Ben's not able to do the damage back to him? So that in itself is valuable, because he's not able to pile in and get more sisters into combat. So,
well, he's managed to save the 6 damage from Marathi's tail by hitting his 6-up save there, Ben Savva. So at least some of the attacks from Marathi not quite going Ben's way. Not quite going Jack's way, sorry.
Should we turn on the microphones to see what's going on?
Well, let's do it.
Okay. We should have charged 20 grand. We should have charged more, I think.
That was the other option we were talking about.
Yeah.
No, it's just, mate, this is a title.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So we're in one of those key bits of the game where Ben needs to decide how many, what he wants to do next, whether he wants to move with the Witch Elves, whether he wants to move with the Sisters of Slaughter.
Yeah, you can't do any damage to her, can you?
So he's just, I think, removing the model. He's just removing the models, and then he'll be able to choose where he's going next.
So my attacks now. Do
This was interesting play by Jack, and if he wins the next turn, he might be able to retreat Marathi and score that objective at the top level.
Well, depending on... I mean, if we're saying that Ben is going to lose some figures to coherency,
Yeah.
will it not work out that Jack's just naturally out of combat with Marathi anyway?
Yeah, no, that actually is true. It's a good call, Tim.
At which point, yeah, she's just in a really great spot to attack that objective.
Yeah, not only attack that objective, but you might want to take on that Slaughter Queen. Or the Cauldron.
Yeah, I mean, the Cauldron, it can definitely hit like a truck in combat, but yeah, it can hit very hard in combat, but at the same time, it's if the charge is coming off from Marathi first, then yeah, that could be a bit of a problem for Ben.
Yeah, although if Ben wins this next turn, the Witch Elves, although they're locked in combat, they still put out a lot of damage. So
Yeah, the Witch Elves up there, they're in good position.
yeah,
And right now on points, Ben is in pretty reasonable shape.
Ben's in great shape, and I think Jack's likely to only get 1 point here. So we're looking to going into turn 3 with Ben in the lead 6-3. And if he wins the double, or if he wins the next priority, he'll get another 3 points, and it'll be an uphill struggle for Jack to try to come back from it. So we're looking at 9-3 potentially if Ben wins the next priority.
Yeah, that priority roll, going to be a huge one. I kind of wish that we'd given the players on camera gigantic D6s just for the priority roll, because it's so huge and it's lovely to be able to pick them out on camera. Some of these dice, I mean, the dice they're using not small, it's just a matter of we're trying to fit a 6x4 onto a comparatively small screen. For you guys watching on phones, well done.
So you can see what Jack's just pointing out to Ben now, which is that although the Witch Elves are in combat and they need to pile in, some of the Witch Elves are closer to the White Lions. Some of the Witch Elves at the bottom are closer to the White Lions in the top right, the 5 left. And some of the Witch Elves at the bottom are closer to the White Lions at the bottom right. And then obviously you've got the Frost Tower in there. So Ben doesn't have a lot of ability to actually pile in. So although you get a lot of attacks with the Witch Elves, Jack's playing this to try to force Ben to stretch out and using his reliance on the supporting characters to try to limit the damage that the Witch Elves can do.
I tell you what, for players looking to learn about the benefits and indeed potential drawbacks of long snaking units, this is the match to watch.
This is the match to watch, and I think Jack and Ben both have a lot of experience with doing similar things. So this is great to see, and we're really seeing some top level skill today.
As one would expect from the deciding final round of our tournament here. I mean, this AngelCore field, it's not a gigantic tournament in terms of numbers of players, but the quality of players in this tournament, just fantastic.
Yeah, so Jack is the reigning master in the UK. So the Masters is a tournament ran in January, where the top 16 get invited from top 16 based on tournament performance over the year. So your top 4 tournaments count. Both Ben and Jack were there, and so they're both top players in the UK. And I would say Ben's using probably the stronger army, but Jack is being known to taking slightly left field choices.
7 wounds there being inflicted by just 4 witches on that Frostart Phoenix, in spite of the fact that it's got those buffed up saves.
Yeah, so I don't know how many saves it has. It doesn't look like it has many saves now, which might have been because it's was out of position when there's casting. But yeah, the witches are strong. So this is where the stronger list from Ben can potentially help him out of some mistakes.
Yeah, I mean, I've liked the fact that we've seen a couple of players that have chosen to take unusual army factions. Yes, there's a little bit of a cost to ending up with some of these Firestorm factions. You don't get to choose your realm, which hurts a little bit, but at the same time, we've seen them doing good work.
Yeah, I mean, I think Order has a lot of factions to choose from for the Firestorm Allegiance. Some are quite narrative. The Hammerhole, it does help with bravery, which hasn't mattered so far. But it's nice to see something different being taken.
I mean, you say it's not helped. I mean, passively it might well have done. It might have altered a lot of what Ben Savva has elected to go for, because things like his Mind Razor plan and whatnot, which is so good against so many other armies, it's almost off the table before you start once you have to worry about all of these bravery buffs that are just passively there for Jack.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of playing Mind Razor when I run my Grots out, so it does a lot of damage to me. So I think that this is the end. So the Frostheart lost 7 wounds to the Witch Elves, but we're going to be coming into the priority round, and I think that's going to be really interesting, because if Jack wins this, we could end up seeing... Okay. Sorry, we could end up seeing... sorry, I was just watching the pile-ins that were going on. So if Jack wins the next round, we could end up seeing the Frostheart retreating, scoring the objective on the top left. We could see Marathi killing the unit of 10 sisters on the bottom left. So that's an interesting scenario to be in.
Yeah, because don't forget that there's one number of points that you score for holding objectives, but if you take objectives from your opponent, you get a little bonus.
Yeah. So sorry. The reason I froze for a second. Because they're out of coherency, the sisters can't actually pile in. So this was the issue that I talked about earlier, that you can't, whether they could pile into coherency again. And I think the Frostheart is the thing that blocks this, which was great play from Jack earlier. So that's why I froze for a second, just because Ben started moving some things, and I think it was just a genuine mistake from his part.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't come up very often. Being involved in 2 combats at opposite ends of your line that's already out of coherency is a very unusual turn of events. And this is exactly the kind of thing that I can imagine less experienced players just not even realizing was going on. Yeah. And
there's very few abilities in the game to specifically pick a model and remove it. So Marathi has it, Nagash has it, and a Star Drake have it. And anyone else in the chat, let us know if there's any other things to watch out for. But there's only a few things that can actually do this. And we're seeing two Marathis on the table, and they can both do it. So you can see what Jack's done with all his White Lions and Arcanauts. So he's grouped everything together so that even if Marathi pitches one, or removes one, he's not going to lose coherency.
And now, when does unit figures being removed count in terms of battle shock? Do you remove them for coherency and then treat that number as your number for battle shock?
No, battle shock happens before.
I see.
The reason why this is quite useful is if you've kept broken coherency when you're removing casualties because you want to keep near a character, you can actually break coherency and keep one model close to a character for inspiring presence, and then you just remove that model afterwards for coherency. So it happens after battle shock.
Another nuanced little trick when it comes to these long battle lines.
Yep, so we've just seen Ben remove it, so we'll be going into the priority roll.
All right, this is going to be a very important roll. Now, some priority rolls, you kind of know that no one really wants to take the double turn yet, but...
So I would be surprised if Jack gives it... Did Jack win it? Did we miss that? Okay, so it looks like Jack won the priority roll.
And let's just update our points here. So Jack will have picked up in that round just the 1 point, I think.
Yep, just the 1 point. So we're looking at 6-3 with Jack taking turn 3.
Big round ahead here. Really interesting turn, last turn for Jack. A lot of movement tricks, and here's where he potentially gets the reward for that clever play.
Yep, because remember, there's no one scoring Ben's objective on the top left. So if Jack scores that, that's 2 points to Jack. There's no one scoring, or there's only 10 sisters scoring it on the bottom left. So depending on the movement available, Jack could potentially be looking at scoring an additional 4 objectives. I struggle to see how he could take the top right with the witch elves there. Well, I could easily see Jack come away with this with 5 points.
And 5 points is exactly what he needs to get him back in this. And it also means that Ben Savva has to figure out how he's going to split his forces to be able to try and win some things back. Having 1 or 2 big flyers that can surprisingly pressure objectives is a big deal. And I guess that for Morathi, in terms of getting to the bottom left objective, the fact that it's being defended actually makes her life easier. You get to make a small move and then a charge to get close to the objective, rather than having to do it all just based on your regular movement.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that would largely come down to what's going to happen with this Frost Heart. So the Frost Heart, which is in combat already, has taken 7 wounds, so it's still movement 12.
Wow.
Which is not a short amount of distance for Jack. But as we said earlier, the Sisters of Slaughter have a 6-inch pylon, so he needs to be careful that he doesn't start taking or doesn't allow the Sisters to pile in and get within range to stop him scoring, because bodies are the thing that counts here. And while the Frost Heart is quite big, it's still only one model.
It's also a big base in terms of getting 6 inches away, because he has to go over the top of these sisters, and so even a run here might not be quite good enough, depending on the role, I guess.
Yeah, well, we're seeing him start to move now, so I think this will be interesting. I suspect then what he's going to do is move the Frost Heart that's not in combat in and charge the sisters to stop them piling in to him. So we've just seen him score this objective, essentially.
It's 6 inches to the objectives on this one, isn't it?
It's
Sorry,
6, yeah,
I was still in my last scenario where it was 3, and I was like, this seems like a long old range to get that objective.
No, so that's 6, so that's very comfortable. But what he needs to do again, and I'm sure Jack is going to remember this, but the sisters have that 6-inch pylon, so they can still pile in unless he locks them in again. And he can do that by what he's just done now, which is move that Frost Heart up and charge the Sisters of Slaughter, and it means they can't pile in towards the Frost Heart.
I'm really liking how Jack Armstrong's playing this game. There's been a lot of very, very smart movement here.
Yeah, I think the giving Ben the second turn was a risky move, because now Ben could it stopped Ben getting the double here, but it was definitely a risky move, and you can see why Jack was playing for turns 3 and 4 to really score those objectives, and he took advantage of some but ultimately bad positioning from Ben. That I think when you're not playing a top player like Jack's, a lot of people wouldn't take advantage of that.
I mean, I guess that there's different levels of rules of thumb maybe that you get used to playing with your list. So I can easily see how if you're playing a Daughters of Khaine list, you might say, all right, we're going to snake out our lines so that we can get as many buffs from as many things as possible, stay snaked out, gives us a bit of flexibility, and rely on our pile-in. Here, we found an opponent that's got a way of making the most of that line of reasoning.
Yeah. Now, remember that while Ben might look like he's going to struggle here, he still has the heart renders to drop down. And so even if Ben can drop them down both on the Frost Heart he can drop 5 to reclaim that objective on the top right quite easily. And depending where Jack positions Marathi with the charge, he might be able to move the heart renders to get within range there as well. So that's where the heart renders are going to come in, really important for Ben in turn 3.
Yeah, I guess that with the heart renders, it might be possible for him to find himself in a position where he doesn't need to be in combat because he's just got more bodies and that's enough bodies to contest that objective.
Yeah, and Ben might end up holding the heart renders until later in the game, because if he brings them down too early, then although he'll score additional points for taking the objective off Jack, then Jack might just take it back. So maybe Ben will decide to hold off until turn 4 or 5, and means that the Marathi and the Frostheart just have to sit there for 2 or 3 turns and do nothing. So it's really
an expensive set of models to leave just sat on objectives.
Exactly. So I think it's really interesting. The heart renders add so much depth to this list, and it's one of the reasons why Daughters of Khaine are without a doubt the strongest army in the game at the moment.
Wow. High praise indeed for the Daughters of Khaine.
Next to Moonclan, which are well known to be the best. Best faction for anyone wanting to start.
I thought it was very polite of you to give everyone else a chance at this AngelCore by gracefully deciding to just come and do some commentary and hang out this weekend.
Exactly.
And of course, with Shadespire, the Night Vault, One Underworld, the Night Vault, we have now got some new grots coming along that look pretty saucy.
Yeah, so they're coming out next week. Quite excited. The rules aren't too bad. So
yeah, apparently the Shadespire War Scroll, the Age of Sigmar War Scroll for them is also potentially something that might be worth running, which would be a first for the Warhammer Underworld's War Scrolls.
Yeah, so I'm going to do a tournament at the start of November, so in 4 weeks, and I think I'm going to run it in at least one of the competitions. Not sure I'm going to fit them into the 2,000 points, but 160 points for a Shaman, a Fanatic, 2 Squigs, and 3 Grots isn't too bad. So,
and the spell on the Shaman's quite a nifty one.
It is. I think you need to take a spell portal. So the spell on the Moonclan Shaman from the Nightfall Warband is it's a 3-inch range, but it can force an opponent to retreat. So with a spell portal, you could, as an example here, force the Frostheart Phoenix to run away from the objective, which, if you were playing Duality or Arcane Places of Power, could be quite funny. So I've been promised a cookie if I can achieve it. So we have a Moonclan WhatsApp group, and I'm definitely aiming to try to get that.
Someone's got to get the cookie. It might as well be you.
Thanks, who's Andy? And Bry one just said this is the best commentary he's ever heard. So that's great praise, Tim.
High praise. We will take it.
We will take it.
And you know what? The plan is that we're going to include. We're going to be having regular AngelCore matches going on Tuesday nights here at Magic Madhouse. This stream gear, it's ours. It's just going to sit here. So we might well be doing more regular streams for Age of Sigmar if you guys want to see it.
Yeah, if there's people who are interested, we're definitely happy to do it. We can also take some requests. So Adam from Angel has an Order Draconis list, which has been very popular in tournaments. We're happy to force him to run it and do some commentary on that.
You know what? I don't think that it would be that much forcing required somehow. All right, so Marathi having a little bit of a Barney in the corner here. The Frostheart Phoenix also getting involved up top. This is where Jack potentially wins all of his money back here. He will need to have Marathi do a fair amount of damage if he's going to tag this objective. Might be a little bit. Is this a little bit of shooting beforehand?
I think this is the shooting actually at the minute. So
yeah, that looks about right. Going to be a big old combat coming up here. So here this is Marathi just doing the shooting, dealing with a champion before we get to the universally understood sound of the shooting phrase there coming from Jack Armstrong.
Hey guys, I'm back. So I was just checking with Jack and Ben on the table to see how many wounds Ben's Marathi has. So that is the beautifully painted, albeit looks like grey on the table, Marathi. So she has 3 wounds left. So
she's in danger. That's
in
one
danger.
more battle round potentially left for Marathi number 1, as we're going to refer to her.
Marathi number 1, which Jack referred to at the start of the game as the better Marathi, but maybe he was just being a bit facetious with this description. So
I mean, on paper, this is the Marathi that has more synergies, more obvious written into the rules power, but we've seen Jack Armstrong being able to do all sorts of clever things, and frequently I hear Age of Sigmar referred to as being the game that is won or lost in the movement phase, and I think that we can put a little asterisk by that and just sort of say it's won or lost by movement, because we've seen some incredibly clever movement being done in the combat phase as well, in order to create some very, very mobile armies indeed.
So this is really interesting. I think they've decided to. I'm just coming back now, so this is quite interesting. So we have a White Lion charge into the Witch Elves. So what Jack is probably looking to do is take advantage of the fact that Witch Elves are strung out a little bit, and not necessarily put too many White Lions in. So this is a super important charge phase. So just re-highlighting what Tim just said on the movement is key, and the way they position these charges are going to be huge for how this game is going to develop. And Ben, although he had a lot of models to begin with, is starting to look a bit like he's losing quite a few. So we have the Witch Elves left. The Sisters of Slaughter have really diminished. Jack's just moved in the Frost Heart to stop the Sisters piling in and stopping him contesting.
And I guess that next round Ben is going to be able to get that Cauldron of Blood active. He's going to be able to use that in a fight somewhere. But yeah, he's having to fight on a lot of fronts all of a sudden.
He is. So Jack's really taking advantage of the flying Frost Heart, or the 2 flying Frost Hearts, the Marathi turning into the big version. And he's just put Marathi front and center into the center objective, and that's very important. And the reason why that's very important is if he manages to kill all these Sisters of Slaughter with Marathi, even if the Heart Renders drop down, they won't be able to come in within. They won't be able to come in unless they roll up 4 up to move. So what he's just trying to do is make it harder for the Heart Renders to score that objective with Marathi.
Lots of little nuances to the movement here, and they're ultimately all informed by having great knowledge of what your opponent's figures can potentially do, both on and off the board.
Yeah. Okay, so I think the tail attack went through with Marathi, and that unit is dead.
Yeah, she's swept off an entire unit just with the tail.
So Jack is at least scoring 3
points so far.
Plus that Frost Heart is scored, so he's on 5. So it's going to be 9-6 after Jack's turn 3, with Ben still got turn 3 to go. So
I'm loving how this game is going. So much to learn in the details of how these guys are playing things out here.
Super interesting, I think. I think this is definitely a game I'd recommend people to look back and watch.
And the cool thing about this as well for me is that there are lots of games that you watch where you feel like people are kind of playing by the numbers a little bit. They're doing the thing that their army always does, and the thing that their army always does is good enough that they're going to be able to win the game. So sort of when Nagash gets his portal off and then starts throwing out key debuffs, or maybe doing a cheeky Hand of Fate or whatnot, that to me is, plan A. That's the straightforward bit. When you start seeing players that are really using every piece of the buffalo, they're finding these little nuanced adjustments to their regular plan on the fly in a high-pressure tournament game. This is what makes the difference between a good player and a great player.
Agreed. And so the reason why I say this is a really interesting game to watch from a tournament perspective is Daughters of Khaine are dominating the field at the moment. So they won Facehammer. They've won a lot of and come top in a lot of tournaments recently. They have the highest win percentage of any army according to the stats from the Honest Wargamer. So it's an incredibly versatile and strong army, and Jack is showing just how to beat it. So he's stretching it out. He's taking advantage of exactly what's going on, and of how wide Ben has been with the movements, and with stringing out these objectives, and Jack is capitalising on it. So Ben's Marathi's only on 3 wounds, which highlights the importance of shooting, and just highlighting the importance of mobility. So it's really hard to see how Ben can easily score the objectives on the left-hand side, except for the heart renders that he still has in the sky.
Yeah, there's a lot going on with the details of this, and you're absolutely right, Donald, that for them of you that maybe one guy in your play group is the guy that has the Daughters of Khaine list, and you're all kind of despairing as to how you're meant to deal with these lists that are piling out just crazy numbers of attacks. We're finding out a few details right now, right here in East London, here at Magic Madhouse. And
that's Ben has done very well with these. I think he came second at Blackout at the start of September, so he's a very, very strong player. And it's great to see it's great to see that there is hope for anyone who's not playing Daughters of Khaine to actually beat them. So it's still early days, but Jack's big gamble of giving Ben turn 1 or turn 2 paid off. So,
I mean, all of Ben's games that we've had on camera for him have been very close. They've been games that there've been stages where anyone that casually dropped in would think he is not winning this game. He had a tough game against Death. He had a tough game against Jimbo playing Sylvaneth. Against Sylvaneth, he lost 21 models on the first turn to the Realm ability, and he found a way of pulling it back. Ben Savva is a very, very smart player, and even if it works out that Jack enacts all of his plans here, there's definitely still the potential that Savva could find a way of making this very tough for him.
Yeah, and I think there's definitely some things that Jack probably hasn't done that I would have, although he's probably a better player than me. So one of the things I would have looked to do is starting to push the Arcanauts on the bottom left over to the left-hand objective to try to start scoring that, or at least means that the heart renders aren't able to survive for that long. So especially when you've got slow-moving models, you need to be thinking, what are they doing in 3 turns' time? Because I look at these Arcanauts, and I'm not sure they're going to be able to score.
And also, if you're Jack, you're looking at Marathi, and if your Marathi's on a full complement of wounds, it's going to take 4 turns to kill her. If we get through battle round 3 and she's still unblemished in terms of the amount of damage she's taken, that means that Ben would need to spend the entire rest of the game working at killing off Marathi if he's ever going to do so.
Yeah.
5 points there for Jack Armstrong as we go into the bottom of round 3. He takes the lead. The score now 8-6 in Armstrong's favour.
Yeah. So how do you think the next? How do you think Ben's turn is going to play out now?
Well, Ben's got some big choices on his hands. I think that of the objectives that are being contested right now, the top left is the one that he can most easily do something about. That Cauldron of Blood's just kind of sat there, and he can potentially get it into the Phoenix that I think has taken... That's the one that's taken a fair amount of damage, isn't it? That Phoenix in the top left.
Yeah, so that took 7 wounds from the 4 Witch Elves earlier.
Yeah, so that one I think that he can reasonably contest. I don't know what he does about this Marathi down in the bottom left, though. I mean, is the best that he can hope for just that it's going to have to sit there for the rest of the game? I mean, I guess he's still got models to drop in. That's the other element.
So he has 2 units of Heart Render. So even with the Cauldron sitting there, the Cauldron doesn't necessarily have to charge that Frost Heart, because the Heart Renders can just drop down and score that without any combat.
No risk.
No risk. Now, if he doesn't kill the Frost Heart, that Frost Heart will kill those 5 Heart Renders unless he wins the double. In terms of Marathi, it's the same concept that the Heart Renders can drop down. Marathi's base, while big, is not enough to stop the Heart Renders from scoring it.
Yeah, it's no Nagash size base, that one, is it?
No, but he will need to roll a 4 up. So he might not want to drop both units down. He might just want to drop 1 to score the top left objective. Or maybe he decides to actually drop it near Marathi to force her away from the rest of the army and away from the rest of the fight. Now Jack seems really to have controlled this bottom right objective, and it's really hard to see what Ben can do over the next couple of turns to contest that, because the Witch Elves are locked into combat at the moment with the Frostheart, I believe.
Yeah, they're locked in at the wrong end of their chain.
Yeah. So yes, they can pile in towards the White Lions, but they're not going to be able to do enough unless they run away, which means that the Frostheart survives and only has the Sisters of Slaughter in combat. So this is really interesting. I think it's going to be really tactically challenging from Ben. Not 100% where he's going to go, but Ben's used this army a lot in the last 6 months. He knows how to play it. So super interesting here.
All right, we're in our hero phase. Let's see if we can hear from the table exactly what those guys have got going on.
So it's going to go on witches again. Witch group, we'll go on the witches. Catechism.
Where's your die?
There.
Where's your witches?
There. 3.
Okay, yeah.
Catechism goes off.
Yeah.
Blessing. That's the one. That's the most
I
important.
know.
Every turn, isn't it?
3 up to needed 2.
Yeah. I'll try the -1 hit well again from Marathi.
Yeah,
Will I? Let's keep going on.
Try and spell. No.
So then again, so I'll use Audio Slaughter.
Yeah.
So now go.
Which way your models have to go? You're in a 1-9 dude, you can't find it anymore. You got one of there.
So let's see. Yeah,
That's
it's
12.
a very stretched out
Yeah,
line.
you can't get any more in.
I can definitely get that one more in.
So Ben's just used Orgy of Slaughter, which allows him to pile in and attack in the hero phase.
So we're talking about stretched out lines here. Once the line is as long as it can be, no opportunity for more pile-ins.
So that's so it's turn 3 now, isn't it? So I wasn't re-rolling hits in that turn.
Oh, was that? Oh, yeah, it was my turn, was it?
Yeah. Ah, shit, that would have made a difference.
Not many, you hit most of them.
Probably, actually, yeah. So 3, isn't it?
Yeah.
So that's just I'm back down to 3 command points then. I'm using like 4 points. So yeah. All the 6s.
Your 6s have been incredible.
Yeah, I've been really good on this for their hitting, yeah. So those 2 hits, and then there's 4 more.
When you get more hits than you do rolls,
Bravery, I think. It's like 9 or 10.
Well, it's 10 with hammer.
Okay.
9.
So, well, 5s and rerolls.
That's better. That's actually about average for once.
Yeah, that looks better. That's a bit better, doesn't it? Right, there's 3 more.
That's about right, though.
Yeah. So -1.
So now 5s. Fuck's sake. Oh, 6 heals me 1.
Okay, so you're down to 6.
That is not good. 4 more.
12.
Yeah. Oh no,
10.
10.
It's got 12 roots.
Yeah.
So the Frostlords.
Put that back into the 6. After many. 8.
Yeah, should we just get the one out of it out?
Right. Okay. 2 wounds left here, right?
Okay. So what we're seeing here is Ben using command ability from the Slaughter Queen and Cauldron to pile in and stack. And he's done it on the Witch Elves. It looks like he's going to do it on the Sisters of Slaughter as well.
because you can use command abilities more than once in a turn, apart from a few specific cases where they decided that was a little bit too powerful.
Yeah.
It's not stacking, it's just using a lot of them. And this is the reason that Ben Savva has been relatively cagey about using command abilities early.
Exactly. So he's probably going to continue to do this, and I think the Frost Heart only has 2 wounds left. So it's really not that many wounds left. And if the Frost Heart dies, it's going to be key for him to be able to move the Witch Elves into the White Lions in the screen in the bottom.
Yeah.
And he needs to do something, because Jack can use those White Lions to start contesting that objective on the top right, and Ben really doesn't have a lot of bodies left on the board to be able to win this. So he's definitely hoping to kill that Frost Heart.
Yeah, and this is all in the hero phase.
This is all in the hero phase.
So there's still going to be movement after this.
Yeah. And Ben still can drop in the heart renders, which can do a couple of shots into Jack.
I mean, can he do that while also contesting this top left objective?
I think that's what they're just measuring out now.
Because that would be a hot ticket, as they say.
Exactly.
I love the level that we're seeing this game played at right now. This is a very fitting finale to our AngelCore tournament that's been going on all weekend.
Hi, Tristan Gray on the chat. So Jack has taken Hammerhall. So he's running, his list is 2 Frostheart Phoenixes, Marathi, 2 units of 30 White Lions, 3 Arcanaut Companies, and the Hammerhall formation, which just buffs up the bravery, which is coming super useful today, probably with the Mind Razor from Ben Savva, who's running a more traditional Daughters of Khaine list. 30 Witch Elves, 30 Sisters of Slaughter, Marathi, Slaughtered Queen and Cauldron, High Queen, and 2 Heart Renders, and the Slaughter Troop Battalion. So the Sisters of Slaughter largely being taken off. I think Ben's trying to measure in if they retreat where they can go, because they can still retreat and pile in, which is a really interesting way to play them. So you can retreat, and even though you've retreated, normally you can't retreat and charge. But
Yes.
because they've got a 6-inch piling range, they can retreat and be within 6 inches and then pile in your combat phase, which is great because it means that you're not going to risk being attacked first.
Interesting.
So that's a super powerful way to use them. And looks like Ben is measuring out the heart renders. He's dropping down both units to try to contest the objective. I think he's just measuring out how exactly they need to move. Because the second unit needs to stay outside of 9 of the Frost Heart, but I think he's just trying to plan ahead and pre-measure some things, which is where pre-measuring is super important here. To just agree with your opponent what's possible before you start doing things and moving them.
It's amazing that these guys are able to get into this level of detail in a game while they're also having to think about playing under a clock. I mean, this is the kind of game that I can easily imagine if you're playing it at home. Even if you're playing it 2 players at this level, playing it at home, you could take a huge amount of time on these movement phases trying to get everything perfect. These guys, they're having to find a good enough option.
Yeah, but here's where the skill level between the two really tells. So we've seen Ben make a few mistakes. So when he was piling in with Witch Elves, he didn't pile in the ones on the right-hand side towards the White Lions. That potentially is going to cost him later in the game. So he's probably had 2 opportunities to move into those White Lions and start grinding them down. And he hasn't been able to do that yet. On the other hand, maybe he decided he didn't want to because he was hoping to kill the Frost Heart so that they would be free to charge and get more into combat. But he definitely seemed frustrated that he had forgotten about it earlier in the hero phase.
Now, I'm presuming that in the top right there, that's not a final deployment, because that doesn't look like it can possibly be a legal deployment of those out of the sky there near that Frostlark Phoenix.
No, I thought he was just measuring them up earlier, so I'd be surprised if that was the case.
Obviously, if it works out that it gets to the point where he's doing something that's... I mean, this looks like an attack here now.
It does indeed.
We might just need to get a fix there if it works out that he's deployed something that he shouldn't have done.
I assume Jack is on top of it. It might be worth checking.
Yeah, just the positioning in the top left-hand corner there looks a bit close. Yeah, it's just given that they're now rolling dice, we want to make sure that things haven't moved forward. Okay.
Okay, they have went down.
It does look to me like they're too close to that Frostlark Phoenix, but maybe...
Maybe they've already... They have went down? Okay, so we must have missed this, but I'm assuming that they rolled a 4 up and are able to move afterwards.
I see. The roll is then rather than after shooting.
So it's after shooting, but we might have just missed the initial attacks.
Okay, fair enough.
So this is what we talked about before. He's now scored this objective without actually having to charge. So he's going to be looking at scoring 5 again, or 5 in this. So it's going to be 11-8. He's just charged the cauldron into the frost heart, which means that the heart renders in the top left are going to be safe for a couple of turns. There's a Sisters of Slaughter there, and Jack doesn't have that many bodies up there to start contesting that objective.
Yeah, I mean, this is enough points just off those units in the air that you mentioned. They've come down this turn. They're going to score a lot of points. And even though Marathis ought to be able to take out the ones down the bottom left quadrant, there's not as obvious a path to dealing with the ones in the top left. And this is going to be really tight on points.
I think it's going to be really tight on points. And this is where I mentioned earlier, those Arcanauts on the bottom left that haven't really moved in a couple of turns. Had Jack been moving them, I wonder if that would have been enough to be in range of the heart renders, and that would allow Marathi the freedom to come up and start contesting the top right objective. So that's where it becomes really interesting over moving. Those slow moving units need to be moving very, very early to start contesting.
Yeah, and I guess that's something that, I mean, if we're saying that this is a relatively new list for Jack, then sort of his focus might be, I mean, there's been some very complicated movement that Jack's been going on in other parts of the board, and it may just be that sort of we have the benefit of the top-down view. The top-down view is actually fantastic for trying to figure out some of these strategic points, because you get to take in the entire shape of what's going on rather than just focusing on a key corner that might be looking particularly juicy.
Yeah, and he definitely might have decided against doing that for whatever reason. So we'll see how it goes. So Jack still has 2 full turns left. So if we play this out, he needs Marathi to kill the heart renders and the bottom left and rescore that. So that will get him 2 points. If he then manages to score the top left objective again, that will give him another 2. So it's going to be really important whether or not Ben wins a priority. And I think Ben's been quite unlucky in these priority rolls. He hasn't won one so far. So,
I mean, gambler's fallacy if you want to start chasing that, though, Donald.
Agreed. No, I think it just works out well for Jack probably at this point to keep on winning those, and he had the double. So if there's a draw on the priority, it means he's going to have the choice over who goes next.
That a key change as well within AOS 2. I know that in the first edition of AOS, where it was just a straight roll every time, it felt like that roll was just a little too random. It could be a little too punishing. They made the small adjustment, and it has been an improvement. Yeah.
So we can see where Jack is prioritizing his attacks. He's not too worried about the Witch Elves, and he's wanting to do some damage to this cauldron with the Frost Heart. So he's just piled into the Frost Heart. I think this Frost Heart has taken 10 wounds so far.
So a relatively degraded stat line on that. I don't know how much that actually impacts on the attacks of the Frost Heart so much as its mobility and some of its other sort of softer stats, shall we say.
So the Frost Heart, after it's taken 10 wounds, it only has 3 of the talon attacks. So that talon attack is what really helps it. So it's got, it starts off with 8, and it goes down, it's now potentially only on 3, so it's 3s and 3s, 3s to hit, 3s to wound, -1 rend and 2 damage. So it does lose a lot of combat effectiveness as it loses wounds.
I mean, typically, though, it won't lose that many wounds because it's got the fantastic quality saves.
Exactly. So what Jack is probably hoping for is that this Frost Heart survives the attacks from the Cauldron and the Witch Elves, and can keep the Witch Elves locked into combat, because that's what's keeping him in the game. Keeping the Witch Elves from being able to just wreak havoc on the White Line. So we saw at the start just how strong a Witch Elf unit is on the charge.
Yes.
But it's only strong when it gets as many attacks in as possible. So it had 72 attacks, and it deleted essentially 25 White Lions. So I think that's going to be tough for Jack to continue to survive. But if he does, I think that's what's going to keep him in the game. And I wouldn't be surprised to see him give Ben the turn if he wins this.
Now, why would that be? Because you just said that Ben would be really hoping to get the turn here.
So, if the Frost Heart survives, then it means that Ben's Witch Elves are still going to be locked into combat for another turn or two. So we can see what Jack is trying to do, which is take out the infantry. So he tagged in the Cauldron with the Frost Heart on the right. He's moving the one on the left over to kind of kill the Sisters of Slaughter. What that means is he's planning on trying to wipe out as many models as possible so that Ben doesn't have that many to contest these objectives on the left. And I think he's hoping to win the game based on scoring these objectives back.
A lot of models for Jack over on, for Ben over on this left side of the screen, comparatively speaking. It's just that, as is the case with so many of these Daughters of Khaine, each of those figures comparatively flimsy compared to what Jack's got going on.
Yep, so Jack has the Argonaut Company, so he's got 2 units that might be able to get in range of the Heart Renders, although Ben still has Marathi on the 3 wounds there. I'm not sure what Ben decided to do with Marathi in this turn. She doesn't really seem to have moved much here.
Yeah, like I feel like it may be that there's somewhere better off that she could be, but it may be that equally Ben is kind of hoping that she's hiding in plain sight there.
Yeah, well, I think with the Argonaut Company just standing there and probably getting ready to do 10 shots into her, I think Jack's probably happy with that.
I can't quite remember. I think that it works out that Ben's general is not Marathi, it's the Hag Queen on the Blood Cauldron, right?
Yeah, that's the Slaughter Queen on
Slaughter Queen, yes, sorry.
On the Cauldron. So Marathi gave up leadership there to the Slaughter Queen.
And that's not unusual. The Slaughter Queen typically a little bit of a safer position for these Daughters of Khaine lists.
Yeah, and remember in the pack here, you get points for killing both your general, but also your opponent's general, but also non-general heroes. So you can be a bit more aggressive with Marathi if you're not giving up as many points. And that's something that these guys are going to start thinking about, or probably already thinking about, which is, how am I going to get secondary objectives here?
Yeah, and one thing to be said for the way that Jack's played this is that aside from the carnage that happened with the White Lions, he kept most of his value of units on the battfield, and they're good and spread out.
Just had a priority roll, and Jack won it, so he drew it, but because he went first, he's going to take it. So that was key, and we just saw the excitement on the table.
Yeah, big fist pump there.
Yeah,
in relation to that roll.
Ben scored 5, so he's on 11 now. So he scored 5 because he collected the objective on the top right, the objective on the bottom left, and he continued to score the objective on the top right.
And so, going into this next round,
do you want to? Should we turn on the mics at the
table? Yeah, let's get the table going.
They're not within 7 either, so hold in there. 6 of 6s.
Unit dead. Oh, I can now retreat onto that. Oh, this is too tense. Right. Oh. Fucking hell. I think the white line's going to have to go for it now, just because I need you to stop you being able to pioneer this. Retreat. So, normal move. Retreat that one. So it's what, one wound left?
One wound left, yeah.
Is your Medusa within 6?
That's a good point.
Actually, I've got 6.
Should have been. Yeah, didn't measure that.
Didn't
right?
spec- no.
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, no, I didn't specify, but I just think that's
Yeah,
was,
that's fine.
That was oversight.
So it's still got an 8-inch move. Right.
So we're now in the movement phase, and because the heart renders have been taken off, Jack's hoping that he can retreat onto the objective.
He's
and-
almost close enough that he doesn't have to retreat.
and he wants to make sure that he stays outside of any pile-in
I
ranges.
just want to make sure I've got enough room. So he's got 9, so he's got an extra on the pit, so he's got a 10-inch move. So that means I can have a 16-inch move if I retreat. So which will be get to there, which is outside of 3 of both. So you would then have to get both in, but you wouldn't then take. If you killed one, you'd take it. So I almost want to hold you off at 6, which I'm going to struggle to do because within 3. Yeah. But me to be able to send both of them this way and not lose one, and I could get lucky. So I'll do that. So I'll see what my run roll is. 4, which gives me a 14, which is actually, well, I'm easily, so I'm 10 inches plus normally, so 14, yeah, so.
So now we're seeing that both Frostheart Phoenixes have retreated
Must say yesterday,
to
I had a
stay away from
easy win.
the
Second game was
so that both Frostheart Phoenixes staying away from are retreating to score that objective, which means Jack's going to score top left and the heart renders are gone. So it's going to be hard for Ben to take it back, although he's got 2 characters that can potentially charge and kill the Phoenixes, which have taken a lot of wounds now. And then on the bottom left, I'm assuming Marathi's just going to kill these heart renders.
Yeah, obviously we were helped out a little bit there by some Ed Sheeran play from Jack Armstrong, just thinking out loud, letting us know exactly what he's going for. But yeah, he's got the top left. That one is pretty safe for this turn. It seems likely to me that Jack ought to be able to clean up this bottom left as well. And yeah, like, this is going to be very interesting. I guess that the one thing that we do not have visibility on right now is exactly how long's left on this round. This is the last round of the tournament. I believe that they've got a good amount of time to go.
So there's 30 minutes left in this round.
And they're at the top of round 4. So it may well be that they don't actually get to the end of battle round 5 here.
I can definitely see that potentially being the case, but these players probably start speeding up. They're quite fast anyway, and there's not that many things left to do.
Yeah, I suppose that there's a lot of areas of this board that aren't really that important at this point.
Yeah. So I imagine what we're going to see happen now is he's moving the Arcanaut companies, and this is what I meant earlier. So those Arcanaut company, if he had moved like in turn 3, he would have been in a position potentially to chart or to shoot. Although again, Ben could have moved away, so it's always hard to say. But by not moving them, he's just left him slightly out of position, and it means Marathi's having to waste her time dealing with them and not moving on to try to protect those the objective on the top left, because that's going to potentially go to Ben in the next turn.
Yeah, it's going to be tough for Jack to feel 100% that he's got the top left, just because he's only got 2 models up there. It's not that difficult for for Ben to get more models up there.
Well, I think Ben only probably has 2 models that can come in, but those Frostheart Phoenixes have taken a lot of damage and been in a lot of combats. So I think they only have either 2 or 1 wound left, depending on which one we're looking at. So I think it's going to be tough for Jack. So he's going to probably flip Marathi over, or he might want to flip Marathi over to when she charges, so that she can be closer and start threatening the top left. So it could swing back to Ben, but then I would expect Jack to be taking it in his battle round 5.
All right, these guys just carefully measuring out their ranges.
And this is where rushing and making mistakes could cost either of these 2 players the game. So it is important to take your time. But I think what we're likely to see, and it'll be interesting to see if whether Jack charges in the White Lions into the Witch Elves, because if he doesn't do that, then the Witch Elves are going to get those ones tailed back, who are further back. They're going to have time to move up to the right-hand objective. So I'm expecting Jack to try to tag those Witch Elves in, and he might even be able to score this objective in this round, because it's hard to see any other major combat going on other than the White Lions and the Witch Elves in this turn.
Yeah, and that seems like a charge that the White Lions ought to be making.
It does, but the only thing to remember is Jack doesn't have any heroes nearby to stop the White Lions battle shocking off. And this is where the Hammer Hall of +1 bravery and the White Lions banner might actually come into play.
Yeah.
It may save a couple of White Lions from fleeing.
And every model will count in terms of making sure that this objective gets claimed by Jack.
Yeah. Now, what we're definitely expecting to see is the Arcanaut Company, who've done well so far with the shooting, taking Marathi off. So I think this is the Skyhook shooting into Marathi.
All right.
And she's dead.
Marathi down. Suddenly, those dwarves rule the center of the board. They might even be able to get some cheeky shots off here at the Witch Elves there. I'm not quite sure on the range on that.
I would expect so, although they might not want to do that, because you probably want to be not reducing the charge ranges. Oh no, the Heart Renders are gone. So that would have been the Arcanaut Company shooting the Heart Renders. And so it's now looking really solid for Jack. So I don't see any way Ben can score this bottom left objective. So that's going to be two points in this turn and 1 point in the next turn.
Yep.
He's going to score the bottom right for 2 turns, so that's another 2 points.
So we're at 5 points over the next 2 rounds.
Yeah. So he's going to score 2 at the top left, certainly in this turn. So it's going to take him up to 15 points at least.
Yep.
Ben, on the other hand, might score the top right over the next 2 rounds. So that would take him on 2. And he might be able to take the top left back for next round and score it for another. So you're probably looking at Ben scoring 5. So that would take 16-15 to Jack. Or sorry, to Ben.
But what we have in here is a lot of Ben might be able to do this.
Exactly.
He could do that.
So it's still up in the air. And I think it's going to depend on whether Jack can try to take this objective off on the top right. Because if he managed to charge the White Lions in, kill a lot of Witch Elves, and make them a lot less dangerous, then it's hard to see where Ben can win this game.
Yeah, if he can take a lot of models off the board, firstly, it means that it makes his holding the objective that much easier. Secondly, it means that he doesn't need to worry so much about the amount of damage they're going to be able to deal back. And then, yeah, once those Witch Elves are gone, really just model count for Ben Savva is going to become a big issue as we hit the latter stages of this game.
Agreed.
Oh, this has been an absolutely great game. Ben Savva, if he wins this tournament, he will not have done it the easy way. We've seen 3 solid games from Ben, and he's really shown that it's not, when it comes to winning an AOS tournament, that you win it when you finish writing the list. There are lots of people, I think, that could take the shortcut of, oh, well, you know what, Daughters of Khaine are the best army right now. They pick up a bunch of daughters, they get their Marathi painted up, and they think, right, that's good enough. No. It turns out if you want to win one of these events, you need to be a very good player.
Yeah, you both need to be a good player and know how both your army works and your opponents. And I think this is always the difficulty with playing something that's sort of the most popular army on the scene, or one of the more popular ones, is because players like Jack will figure out what they need to do. So for me, this has been a fascinating way for me to learn how exactly do you beat these lists. And what we're probably seeing from Jack as well now is, how do I score these objectives or the secondaries, because that's what's going to potentially decide who comes top.
Yeah, because remember that Ben Savva is the only player that has 4 majors so far.
Yeah.
If Ben loses, then we're going to have a bit of a scrum in terms of players that have 4 wins, and it comes down to these additional points that you can get from a whole variety of different factors, a lot of which comes down to what exactly has been able to be killed off. Killing off heroes is a big deal. Scoring areas of the battlefield is a big deal. Having a few command points spare at the end of turn is a big deal as well. You get 1 point for each command point for the first 2 that you have remaining at the end of game. Lots of little incremental elements that are going to be pretty pertinent here.
So the secondaries, the battle line units alive. So I think Jack's going to probably score 3 here. Ben might find it more difficult because he's only got his witch elves left alive, I believe. Unless there's Sisters of Slaughter actually on the top of the screen there. Wizards with heroes and artifacts, you can score max 2 points from that. So I think that's going to depend on whether or not the Frost Hearts survive and whether Marathi counts as having an artifact, or she's a wizard anyway, so that's fine. So Jack's going to score at least 1. Ben is probably going to score 1 from his general. And then table sections that the unit's in, and I think that's where Jack's really going to come ahead because he's got a lot of units still on the table, and Ben doesn't quite have that. So I think Ben's going to probably struggle, and that could be where we come down to when it comes to the podium.
I'm just going to try and mark out those sections for you. I'll get my lines in place and try and get them neatly lined up, just so that we can get a bit of a sense as we hit the dying stages of this game as to exactly how things fix up on. Let's get that line across a little bit. They're not exactly measured, but that's probably vaguely close to.
That looks about right. So we've got Marathi. Marathi may end up staying on the left-hand side, depending on whether she needs to score that objective again. But I wouldn't be surprised if we see her stay on the left, bottom left, just to score that secondary. Very much depend how things are going. And you can see what Jack's doing here, just helping Ben roll some dice and speed up the game and keep it moving forward.
And part of this is him being friendly, but he definitely also wants to make sure that he gets the full number of battle rounds if he can.
Yeah, because I think he's going to come ahead on this, and it's going to really depend on how things go on Ben's round. Nobody wants to win on because you didn't finish off the game.
Yeah, ideally, we need to have time limits. We can't have a tournament that lasts forever. But at the same time, a lot of what we really want to make sure is that those time limits, they're an impetus for people to do things, but not an impetus for the game to actually stop.
Well, I think that's an interesting one, because if you decide you've got 30 minutes left and you're not going to finish the game, you need to agree with your opponent then, because then you make decisions to finish the game. And if you then decide to extend the game because your TO extends it round by about 10 or 15 minutes, that changed how you would have moved in the previous turn.
Yes.
So I think that's a really important one that you need to just agree with your opponents. And now we're seeing Jack remove white lions, and this is where witch elves are just a painful unit to play against.
They can do a ton of damage.
Yeah.
So many attacks, even from comparatively few models. I mean, yes, these white lions, they've got a good save,
wow.
but crikey, look at that. It felt like a good attack in. I mean, it was Jack that had the initiative on this fight, but you know what? It might be that he's underestimated quite how potent these witch elves can be, as have we all, because that was a very potent attack.
That was a lot of it. Oh my, have we removed all of them? Okay. So I think it looks like the witch elves did 25 wounds to the white lions.
Again, that's the second time that they've done that.
That's incredible. And I think that was always going to be the risk. So now Ben's in a position where he might want to, he might be able to charge in and score this bottom right objective.
So, yeah, this is what Ben Savva needed. A little glimmer of hope here. And we sort of said that Jack's got some fairly straightforward, almost guaranteed points. Ben's got a few that are a little bit riskier. If Ben can make all of his risky points, then he may well be picking up a big trophy.
So I think Jack's going to score 5 here. So it's going to be 13-11 to Jack. with Ben still having to do his turn 4. So it's really going to come down to whether or not Ben can manage to kill enough one of the Frost Hearts to score that objective, and I suspect he will be able to. But I think those White Lions are going to flee, and then Ben might potentially run those Witch Elves down and kill the Arcanine Company and score that bottom right objective. Because I was surprised, I didn't expect the White Lions to die quite so readily.
Yeah, that was a decisive attack.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can see there Jack Armstrong's face kind of rocked. Well, you can't see. Donald and I can see. He's a fairly smiling fellow normally, Jack, but that you could tell that attack stung.
And that's the difficulty with Witch Elves, and Ben's enjoying that breathing space that he's just been given. Now they're measuring out where things are. Still a very tight game, and anything could happen at this point. And I think we're going to need to see the Arcanine Company. I think Jack needs to win the next priority roll, and probably needs the Arcanine Company to do a lot of heavy lifting. Jack should be on 13.
There we go.
We're going to need the Arcanine Company to do a lot of shooting into the Witch Elves to take those down, because we see how much damage even a couple of Witch Elves can do.
Yeah, anything to whittle down those numbers so they stop rolling so many dice. Crikey.
So we're starting to see results come in from other tables. So this is obviously table 1. I think we have 22 players here in AngelCore. It's a venue in Magic Madhouse.
Yeah, East London. Come by and say hello. We're just by Olympic Park. We're more than happy for you guys to come along, get in a game of AOS, get in a game of all sorts of things. We've got pretty much everything here. But
Yeah. So
right now, the only game in town, though, this finals, and there's still much to play for.
So there's much to play for. And I think if Ben wins, he's probably going to win the tournament. But if he doesn't, then it could come down to secondaries. So Ben also needs to start thinking, actually, how do I stop Jack scoring quite so many secondaries?
Yeah, some of these lists have proven very, very adept at secondaries. Like, I think that part of the reason that Death proved very popular in this tournament is that it's a very good way of holding your opponent off scoring secondaries, because it's got a bunch of figures that it can be really difficult for your opponent to remove things from the battlefield.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of heavy lifting from those Witch Elves. They still have Ben still has quite a few models left, just considering how many he's deleted. So we can see that he's just after running the Witch Elves. He's going to start moving them down. He's probably going to charge them, kill those last remaining White Lions, try to kill the Arcanine Company, and start scoring these objectives. So I think these guys are just working out whether or not how it's going to work out. But I think really it comes down to, can these Witch Elves, who I'm so surprised, I didn't expect them to kill quite as many White Lions, and I think Jack was surprised as well. Can these Witch Elves take the objective on the bottom right?
Why I went for that. If I'd be defending a lead. Yeah. Double one? Yeah.
So Jack's looking for a double 1 charge from the Witch Elves.
And then on the re-roll, another double 1.
I think that's an optimistic bet from Jack.
It's an epic game, but really good game. Yeah.
I think Jack's played very, very well here.
So you do well. Someone from the South London needs a full bet. That's what
It's also, I was saying to Ben though, it's like, I just found yesterday, I was definitely still getting the hang of the list, where like, to both my games today, I felt like, right, I'm playing it properly. Like with you, I just why did I just charge everything in first turn and do exactly no, exactly. It was so stupid, and it was like, I just haven't played since Bobo, and it was just, it's getting the hang of it again. Yeah. And that's exactly what I should have done.
So these guys, you can hear Jack, even though he's on table 1, he's saying, yeah, still getting a feel for how to play this list. Some of these games, like every game that you play is practice for your next game. And so for a player like Jack, obviously he would love to take away the big trophy today, but as much as anything, he's gaining a lot of data points for future events as well. And you can see they're taking it pretty philosophically, feeling like he's playing well today, though, and I think I'd agree.
Yeah, I think he's definitely doing well. And I think he's probably suffering a little bit from what he was just saying. He's not played since Bobo, which was back in sort of towards the end of July, start of August. And he's been playing a bit of 40k, so everybody suffers from a bit of gaming lethargy, where you play one game and each game operates a bit differently. So he's been playing a lot of 40k. So we've just seen him lose a Frost Heart to the shooting attack from the Medusa. So there's only one model there contesting the objective, and I suspect that Ben's going to be taking that back. So we're going to come into Ben's going to score at least 3 here, if not 5. So it's going to be 16-3 to Ben coming in at the end of turn 4.
You see here players looking up the details of some of the war scrolls on their phones as an absolutely fantastic tool for all tournament players, and all players in general. It gives you access to all the war scrolls, lets you make sure that you understand what your units do, but also means you can prepare a little bit for what your opponent might bring along.
Yeah, and I think what they're trying to do now is just measure where Marathi is, to make sure Marathi can't charge and score that objective. So it's well played from Ben to make sure. I think Ben's probably got this, Tim.
It's that big turn with the Witch Elves able to just completely, well, I mean both the big turns of the Witch Elves to just decimate, worse than decimate, it's more than 1 in 10 get killed, all of them got killed, the White Lions, has just meant that it's been difficult, even with every trick in the book that Drac Armstrong's been able to find, for him to be able to really get consistent long-term advantage.
Yeah, it's just an uphill struggle, but I think Jack's definitely showing just what you need to do against these guys, of stretching them out and making sure they don't score too many objectives. So, okay, so I think they've just called it.
Let's go down to the table and just hear the last chat.
Ben's got it. So they would run away. It's just that was a truly epic game. I really enjoyed that. Yeah, it was really good. It was really just tight and tactical. Quite calm as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with the guys. You know what? That was just a bit of tactical perfection there in our final round. Very, very excited to see how that one played out. Ultimately, Ben did get the victory there. We'll just update his points just so I think 15 was safe, and he was probably going to get to a few more than that even.
Yeah, I think he was going to finish this on 16 alone. And ultimately, it just came down to that White Lions charging into the Witch Elves, which was a risky move from Jack, but he needed to do it to tie the Witch Elves up. And if he didn't do it, then he wouldn't have been in a position to threaten them or to threaten Ben on the objectives. So there's probably a few things that maybe if he had been moving those Arcanaut companies up, maybe Marathi would have been a bit more free. If he had been shooting more into the Witch Elves earlier on, maybe that could have helped, but ultimately there's not much else he could have done.
Yeah, I mean, he kind of said in terms of the play with the White Lions that if it had worked out that he was leading rather than chasing points, he might have played them a little bit differently. As things stand, he was chasing points for a lot of the while. I mean, Witch Elves, fast, able to kill a lot of things off, and ultimately able to claim the objectives that were needed to be able to close this game out. So that is the end of our round 5. Do check out on Twitter, and we will be loading up onto our magicmadhouse.co.uk, onto magicmadhouselondon.com, the new website specifically for the store. We'll be loading up all these videos, plus all the lists, plus the pack, plus the final standings and so on. So in the next day or two, you will get a chance to find literally everything you possibly want. If you check out on YouTube, we got the AngelCore 2018 list of all of the videos, so you'll get to see each and everything. And of course, we will be aiming at streaming a whole bunch more Age of Sigmar. So if you want to get involved with watching it, then like, share, subscribe, and we'll make sure that you can watch as much as possible. If you want to come down and play, though, just come on down. We're open every day apart from Mondays. Mondays is when we have a little rest after days like this. And we're more than happy to help you out with all of your gaming needs. But for now, from AngelCore here in London, it is goodbye.
Cheers, guys. Bye.